Please welcome Shweta Maniar, Global Strategy and Market Leader for Life Sciences at Google Cloud, and moderator Sezin Palmer, Managing Director and AI Industry Solutions Leader at NTT Data.
All right. Good afternoon. Well, I have been looking forward to this conversation since the first time I spoke with you, Shweta. So the theme of this event this year, Research to Reality, I think is so exciting, and it's a wonderful opportunity to explore kind of the full spectrum of your background and what you've done. So this is going to be a lot of fun for all of our researchers and scientists and practitioners, I think, as we dive into it. So just to kind of level set and get us started in terms of some of the exciting things you've been working on, can you tell us a little bit about Google Science Cloud, DeepMind, what it enables for researchers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first thing, thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and preparing for today. For us, we are very, very invested in science, very invested in the work that I do is focused in life sciences and in healthcare. So what you're asking is Google Cloud for Science and our work with Google DeepMind. And a lot of that stems from great innovations that are coming from Google DeepMind. A lot of that is in research, and we're trying to understand what part of research needs to be commercialized, should be scaled, that should have access to our customers beyond research, beyond publications. And so there are many parts of Google, Google Cloud included. And so part of our initiative of Google Cloud for Science is commercializing or scaling through Google Cloud some of the most innovative research that's coming from DeepMind or other parts of our organization. And so we're taking things like AlphaGenome, AI Co-Scientist, and looking at how do we scale these through Google Cloud so that we can have access for our customers in the future. And again, these are all well-intentioned, but require testing so that we can provide and understand what are the implications.
That's really exciting. So can you share a little bit about how researchers can take advantage of these capabilities? DeepMind, everything that you mentioned, the protein folding is super exciting. How do they actually get in there and start making use of these capabilities?
So for researchers, for example, for protein folding, for AlphaFold, any researcher can access in a non-commercial setting. However, I had just mentioned AI Co-Scientist. AI Co-Scientist is a hypothesis generator. It is something that can generate a hypothesis and can take, in what I'm going to oversimplify and say, can take a vast amount of data and distill it down and create a set of hypotheses with the parameters that you've set. And this can be done in a life sciences context. It can be done in a variety of other industries. And so we're actually seeing right now and trying to understand what industries that this can be applied for. So you can imagine there's a variety of industries that are really excited to be able to use this. And there was a really interesting article, I believe it was on BBC, that there was a researcher, I believe out of Oxford, who had said that there was, he had shared about a decade's worth of his lab's data into AI Co-Scientist, into this hypothesis generator. And this is one of the very early versions of this model and this tool. And in about a few hours to a day, it generated what took his lab 10 years to create several hypotheses. And he actually thought these hypotheses were quite valid. And in fact, he learned about a few new hypotheses and other things to be areas to explore. So we're seeing a lot of excitement around these tools. And in terms of answering your question around how people can access, you can search for AI Co-Scientist and start to see how to access these in a research context. And a lot of organizations are looking at a lot of organizations are working with us at Google in an early access context right now. And we're continuing to see how we can grow that access as we move forward.
That's really exciting. AI Co-Scientist in particular, the AI hypothesis generation. I know, in my time at Hopkins back in the day, there were many times when researchers said, wow, I never would have thought to kind of link those two parameters. And so the idea of AI helping to generate those hypotheses based on data is really exciting. When you think about kind of where that takes us in terms of the role of the researcher, in the future, what does that look like in the age of AI? What does the researcher do versus what the AI does?
Yeah, great question. I think that really, and it's a question that I actually get almost every day, almost every week, and that is, it does shift the role. And I think it shifts the role in a way that it will now allow researchers to be able to focus on what they've actually been studying for their entire career. And what I mean by that is that you're now able to focus on being the researcher that you got your master's, your PhD, what you studied for. There is a mental shift, though, as these tools become more and more prevalent. And I had shared with you before, right, that we are now all technology people. As this AI shift is happening, we are now going to all be tech people. No matter what role, what industry you are, what title you have, everyone in this room is now a tech person. And that is going to be something that as every month that is passing by, technology is becoming part of everybody's daily life. So how do we now think about all of our roles and how is that changing? So in a researcher's context, we now have to think about how we reframe our thinking of, with AI tools, these are an AI collaborator. It's helping to augment the researcher's work. How do, the human is always in the loop. It's not just like you're going to take what the AI spits out, right? Human always has to be in the loop. So it is right now, think about these AI tools, at least for right now, as a powerful tool to use, a powerful collaborator as part of this right now.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and to your human in the loop point, when we think about reproducibility of research results, I've heard AI can hallucinate from time to time. So how do researchers have trust in the results they're getting? And what is their role, again, in sort of validating the reproducibility of the results that they get?
So hallucinations absolutely can happen. And this is why I always say, right, this is not a silver bullet. This is going to take time. And it's going to take time to continue to test these tools and to continue to work with these tools, and why technology companies and technology organizations will need to work with industries to continue to learn and partner, right? Technology companies cannot do this by themselves. One of the other pieces about the reproducibility. It's funny that you mentioned about reproducibility. That is a huge, important part of being able to trust the output. If you remember, if you just take AI out of the context for just a moment, and this is a conversation that you and I have had before as well, if you just go to PubMed and you take, a number of research, a number of journal publications, how many can we honestly say that we can bring into our own labs and truly reproduce into our own labs? And I think that has been a challenge historically, and now we're moving towards and to be able to trust that we can reproduce the kind of science. Maybe 20 years ago, we couldn't reproduce as easily. Now we're getting to a point where we can reproduce, and we require that, right? it is something that is a standard that we require, that we want to have that level of reproducibility, because the science community requires that. That's the same level of standard that we require of all of these tools, and that the community should require of all of these tools as well. And so that's why I believe technology will be required to, with these hallucinations, with all of these hiccups, when we're testing these different tools. AI Co-Scientist is a great one, but any of these models, we continue to share with a few early testers, get their feedback, go back inside, fix it, make updates, test it again. This is why there's not some big mass rollout, because we are learning. This is a new tool. And so part of that is the learning. We are in a new era right now.
Yeah. Well, and as we talked about, I think it's interesting that we hold AI to a higher standard than we often hold, humans.
Yeah.
So it's been fascinating to kind of see, as you were saying, reproducibility has been an issue long before AI entered the picture.
Yes.
Okay, great. So last question kind of on research, and then I want to shift a little more to how we move into kind of implementation, practical kinds of things. But as you think about the future, what does an AI native research lab look like? However many years from now, 5 years from now, I don't know.
Okay. So that's a very tough one, right? Because I feel like you're asking like a Jetsons futuristic, right? Like this is
exactly
very out there question. But I think we're moving towards, how we are, 15, 20 years ago, we would not really have thought about self-driving cars as really, truly a reality. And that is now becoming more of a reality for us. I think we're going to be moving towards self-driving labs. And that brings me back to this comment that I was making earlier about our researchers. Our researchers are going to not just be looking at, doing the proverbial pipetting and such in the labs, but they're really going to be the orchestrators. They will be really thinking through all of the work that's being done. How are these tools, how are these AI collaborators being used in their labs? And being able to be much more strategists in how these labs are being run. And then also thinking about the reproducibility of a lot of this work as well. So maybe I could say maybe more self-driven labs might be the way of the future for labs.
Very exciting. I'm looking forward to that future for one. Okay, so we've kind of talked about how all of these amazing tools can help researchers, and as we heard this morning, the paper is the invention. So they have a lot of great tools to turn into new inventions. As we think about taking those and bringing them to life in implementation in certain organizations, after working in R&D for a couple of decades, there can be a huge gap between what you can do in that research lab and what's practical to bring into a business. So can you talk a little bit about how organizations can kind of better prepare for the future, and how do they get ready to apply these research breakthroughs?
I think part of this is getting your data ready, right? I think there's a data readiness component to this. This is not about getting the latest cutting edge tools without having some data readiness. I often say you can't build a skyscraper on a swamp. And that is really about making sure within your own organizations that you have your data clean and ready. And clean may not necessarily be perfectly ready, but within reach, within an understandable reach. And the other part is also, again, as I had shared, if we're all tech people now, tech doesn't remain within the four walls of the IT department. And that also means that the technology then is going to be in the hands of those who will be using it, right? And that might be sitting in the research, that might be sitting within, if you're in a hospital, it might, there's a variety of places that it can be used, and not just in the four walls of the IT department.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think that's, that's something that we're seeing broadly. The discussions about AI tools and AI capabilities is no longer limited to the CIO's office or the IT departments. It's across the organization. So, we've also seen lots of powerful technology that some organizations are able to take to really scale and transform, and others tend to get stuck in sort of the pilot phase and not quite be able to, reach those same kinds of impact and accomplishments. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen, particularly in healthcare and life science, but what do those organizations that are really able to transform, what are they doing that's different?
So first, everyone always wants to start with a pilot, right? And I think that sometimes it almost has a negative connotation. But I do think that you do need to start with a pilot or a proof of concept. But it is important to identify a really important problem, not just any problem, but identifying also where you have a low, not just a low-hanging fruit, but a key business challenge, something that is so important that if we could find a solution for it, you would actually invest resources to solve for. So something that is so important to your business. Often, sometimes there is a technology tool that's needed. Sometimes technology is not the solution. So technology is not the answer for everything. And so also making sure that you understand where technology plays a role or where it doesn't. In a healthcare context in particular, I've seen, whether it's in pharmaceutical companies, device companies, diagnostics, or in a hospital setting, where I've seen the most success is when we find a particular use case. And I'll give a really good one, which is, you're not going to find it super exciting, but it has been repeated time and time again, so I will say it. Administrative efficiency has seen so much success as initial success, and I'll tell you why. Because it's been able to be repeated in multiple departments or multiple business units within an organization, and it's a very simplified way to build trust in technology across people who may not traditionally be technology people, right? And so that then builds trust in workflows to be able to scale within their organization. And this is actually true within the healthcare and life sciences industry. I'm also seeing this well across regulated industries as well, in financial services. We've seen this in automotive and others across the regulated industries. Is administrative efficiencies has been one area that we've seen an area of growth and scale.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is, part of building the trust is having those, those use cases, for lack of a better term, in the admin, maybe back office functions, things like that. As we look at agentic AI and the promise that it holds, and of course everybody's talking about, how it's going to transform everything that we're doing. What are your thoughts on how we get to a point of trust where, do you see it being used in the next couple of years in clinical operations and clinical decision making? What are some of the things that you think need to be addressed before the community is ready to embrace that?
We're seeing a lot of use, right? There's a lot of excitement around the use of agents in the healthcare and life sciences industry. That really helps us shift from just providing a recommendation to really being able to collate everything and potentially do something with that information. And there is an opportunity to do some level of reasoning. There is a level of being able to provide some level of action. In a healthcare context, again, you'll hear me say human in the loop, always still looking at these tools as a triage, but absolutely we're seeing the use of agents and being able to use agents in clinical trial settings to better understand where you might identify patients or patient populations that might be better suited for certain clinical trials, right? How you can use agents to reduce drop-off from your clinical trials, for example. So there are already use cases of how agents are being used in a clinical setting, but I do think that it's still going to take some time for us to build trust in these kind of systems.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for the practitioners in the room, one of the insights that you shared with me that I thought was really interesting, when you think about adoption and being able to really scale some of these capabilities within your organization, you said a lot of people focus on the naysayers and try to bring them along. But what you've seen is really that finding those people that are kind of on the other end of the spectrum might be more important. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yes. So often, right, when you are trying to implement a new project or a new technology, and this is something that I have had experience with even well before my time at Google, we often end up focusing on the naysayers. It's a human behavior that we're trying to convince the folks who are against your idea, against your project, particularly if you're trying to implement a new technology or a new tool within your own organization. And there tend to be three buckets of adoption, or three groups of folks. There's the naysayers. There are the folks sitting here. If you look at it as a curve, there's the folks up here that are looking and trying to understand what's going on. I want to understand this new technology. And then you have the couple of people who are over the hump and who are trying to perhaps understand and really maybe taking a risk, taking an investment into this new technology. What I would suggest is actually spending more time with those one or two who are actually looking to invest and spend time on that technology. That, instead of spending time on all of the naysayers, using your time and energy to promote and advocate and support that one person, that one team that is willing to invest in that new technology, that new project, that new initiative, has proven to be where then all the naysayers come around and say, I want to be that person. I want to do a project like that. I want that initiative in my department. And so although we tend to want to go after the naysayers, it's actually better to focus on that one person that actually wants to implement your project. Have you had that experience yourself?
I have actually. It was, going down that similar path in healthcare and trying to get researchers and clinicians to really think about how they can leverage AI. Had a similar experience in terms of, they were like, if you just show me that you can actually do this, then we'll be good. And we just had to pick that one use case where we could demonstrate it, and suddenly they became the biggest advocate for, additional use case development, how we can leverage these tools much more broadly. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that always comes up, and we already kind of talked about the trust, you talk a lot about trust and traceability, right? And particularly in healthcare, but really, there are a number of industries where people's lives and well-being depend on the outcome, right? So, what have you seen where there are some practical insights, practical advice that move beyond like the principles of responsible AI and trusted AI and toward some pragmatic approaches that really enable individuals, organizations to have that trust that's needed?
So moving beyond the principles and moving towards the pragmatic, we've seen organizations really focus on putting their design principles as part of the way that you're building your initiatives, making sure that you have traceability built into each of your initiatives and each of your projects. Repeatability is a big key factor. A good example of being able to have this traceability and repeatability is and this is an example that I'm going to give because it's near and dear to my heart, is a lot of the work that we do in our teams, working with regulatory bodies, we do have to ensure that we can support life science organizations by saying that we can support your submissions with repeatability, traceability, and this traceability is important for their submissions. And so part of their implementation is ensuring that when they're starting from scratch or when they're starting any new initiatives, this traceability work starts. This traceability initiative starts with removing anything that actually doesn't have any traceability tags to begin with. So that's at least one practical application that I've seen how organizations are using it right now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so, and I should have said this at the beginning, but Shweta has agreed to take some questions. So when we're done, you can start thinking about your questions now. But I have a couple more questions before we get to that. So, you've said, I think, a couple times now that we're all tech people, right? And I think there was a day when we said every organization is a tech organization. Now we're saying, no, every individual is now a tech person. Because whether you're developing these tools or just using them, they're everywhere. We've talked about how it's sort of beyond the CIO's organization. So, as you look at adoption, how do leaders start thinking about AI adoption differently, given that now everyone in their organization is a tech person? Do you have you seen some things that are different today than they were maybe 5 years ago? And do you have any thoughts on how they might approach it?
Yes, AI adoption has even changed dramatically in the last 18 months. What we've seen significantly has been that up until 18 months ago, AI was possibly a nice to do. Then it became suddenly an urgent project that needed to be added because boards were asking for it. Then it became the CEO mandate. Then it became the CEO said we have to implement it into our organizations. We're now seeing a real shift that it is becoming part of the goals and the imperatives and the foundations of how organizations are thinking through. And while I'm oversimplifying this, organizations are not just doing this top down and bottoms up, but it's happening both ways. We're seeing that executives and leaders are showing up using these same technology tools so that their employees and the rest of their teams are also seeing how that this is not just that they're pushing these new tools down, and we're also seeing that they're building these sparks within the organization and training different teams on how to use technology so that they can how to use these different new technology tools, how to pilot these new technology tools within their own organization, so that they can learn. Because these new tools are really intimidating. How do you use them? What's the app? What's the input? What's a prompt? How do I actually use these? What's the value in the work that I do? We're seeing I'm a marketer, I'm a comms person, I'm an analyst, why do I need to worry about this? There is an application for all of these roles. If you're a medical writer, all of these roles have an application with these new AI tools that exist. And so a lot of these companies now, those that are successfully implementing AI, they're really making investments in their people to take these courses. And they're making investments in building teams and building leaders who have a little bit extra, who are the sparks, I keep calling them sparks, but who are the little bit extra trained on these AI tools so that they can be more accessible to the teams who are on the ground.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, and as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, we talked a little bit earlier about how we hold AI to higher standards sometimes. And I think it's been a fascinating journey when you think about, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and I'm thinking particularly from like a healthcare perspective. But 10 years ago, when you talked about using machine learning or AI in healthcare, there were lots of questions about the liability associated with that. What if it gives wrong, makes a wrong decision or gives wrong advice? And I think in today's day and age, it's almost, in my mind at least, it's almost the opposite question. Like, what is the liability associated with not using all of the tools that are available? So I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. That's probably maybe a little bit controversial statement, but given that we're all tech people now and there are all these tools available across every industry, how do we think about our responsibility to use all of those tools to help us make better decisions?
I think we're still in an era where we're still understanding the implication of all of these tools. So extremely exciting. I have so much optimism for us to be able to take, all of this information and better understand N of one, understand, all of the makeup that's inside of my body versus yours versus, the next person's, but it's going to take time. And I don't think technology is not the only part of this whole puzzle. There is regulation. There is an entire healthcare ecosystem that needs to take part in all of this. And so technology has capabilities today. And it's not just and there are capabilities, there are learnings. We were talking about, it's not a perfect technology yet. It still needs to learn and be tested, and we are learning as we go along. But the point is, it's not just about the technology. It's people, it's regulation, it's the entire piece, right? The workflows, et cetera. So I think the question that you're asking is it's not an only technology question. I think it's a bigger picture question. And so we will get there, but I think it's not today.
Yeah, that's great.
But I'm excited for the future.
Me too. Okay, so last question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the group. But if people leave here today and do one thing different as a result of what they have heard, what would you want that to be?
Start now. I keep saying we are all tech people, and I mean that because if everybody is a tech person, and don't wait for a perfect model. There is no such thing as a perfect model that's going to exist. It's going to continue to get better. There are going to be new tools. Start learning and figure out what you're going to solve for and how you're going to use it in your own research, in your own work. And so I would say we are now in a world where if we're all tech people, it's all of our responsibilities to learn and understand what the technology and what AI has and will play a role in the work that we all are doing and you all are doing here in the room.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shweta. Thank you for sharing your insights with us and taking the time to be with us today. We have about 10 minutes if there are questions that anyone would like to ask. I think we have some mic runners somewhere, maybe?
Oh, right here. Okay. Hi. So my question is about data security in terms of input. Because personally, when I use AI, I'm putting in a lot of my personal information, data, research, a lot of that information. I'm just wondering how secure that is, and if what I need to do to keep it secure for peace of mind.
So that's a very open-ended question, right? I think it depends on what tools you're using and all of that. I can only respond, I think, from a Google's perspective, right? Google's Gemini, is it's a closed tool. Our models are made where they are not being trained on any of the information that you are putting within it, and so we are not. For example, I think I get questions on, are you looking at the search information to be able to train your models and such? That is also not the case. But I think it's incumbent upon looking at each of the tools that you're using to understand the differences, because This is not a blanket statement that I'm giving you.
Question in the back. Whoever has the mic.
I'm Kit Parker from Harvard. Thanks for being here today. So I have a question that might be in your lane, or maybe I'm asking you to speak broadly for across Alphabet. It's sometimes difficult for me to understand when I'm looking at Alphabet and Google and all the different silos within the company, who owns healthcare and how it's divided up across your broader enterprise. Could you comment on that? And then maybe if there's an integrated strategy for healthcare all the way down from cognitive prosthetics for clinicians to other types of tools on the business end. Could you speak more broadly to the strategy there? Thanks.
Sure. So there's Alphabet, there's Alpha, there's Bet. Alpha is everything that you know as Google, and Bet are the bets that Google makes. Within Alpha, and we have within Google, there are many entities that we have within Google that fall within what you might know as contributing to health work. There are Google for Health, Google Cloud does a lot of our work. We look at Google Cloud as being the hub and spoke model of commercializing and scaling a lot of the efforts that allow us to scale the research that's happening across. So you're asking about an integrated effort. There is no one single, because if you're asking for access from a research side, that is you're going to be talking to a different team within. There is a research health group. I'm looking at it from a commercial side, providing and working with commercial entities and scaling from a commercial standpoint. But happy to connect you with the right folks if there's anything that I can help you with directly. But the general hub and spoke model exists, and there is a central point of contact, because we understand that there are many spokes, because if you can think about it, there are hardwares that are also touching healthcare across Google as well. Thank you.
A few questions up here. Yeah, there's two of them, so you guys can both.
Shweta, fascinating conversation. Is Google working with med schools to define what a clinician of the future would look like?
Yes, they are. They are, yes. We recently partnered with, and I'm not going to remember the name of the medical school, but if you look on YouTube, we did we did a health checkup. It's called The Health Checkup last month. Google just released partnering with a new medical school in Arkansas, I think, and it's partnering with actually using new tools on the future of how medical education is going to be. It's called The Health Checkup.
Sort of piggying back on your question, how are you coordinating or maybe bringing to the table other regulating bodies to make the conversation more robust and making sure that the development of AI, along with research organizations, whether it be basic research to clinical research, and working with governing organizations to build out regulations that are safekeeping for users as well as just community or society at large. And so we're moving AI in a responsible direction.
Yep. Responsible AI is a huge part of Google's focus. And so there's a massive amount of efforts and teams that are dedicated full-time within our organization on something that's called responsible AI. But to your comment around working with external entities, we are often invited and working with such regulatory bodies and external organizations to inform the work that we are doing and also to get feedback simultaneously because we are providing different levels of education about what the impact and what is the impact of these different advances, what this means, and helping to inform these different regulatory bodies, what are their points of view moving forward as well.
Great. I know we had another question over here. So, coming right there. There you go.
Hi, I'm Shailene. I'm from NTT Data. So the term auto research is this new coined term where these agents are basically updating themselves over and over again using these feedback loops and then improving based on a certain baseline or evaluation metric. And this can happen thousands of times overnight, for example. One agent can do this. This is particularly tricky when it comes to life sciences because it's such an important area where you really need to get things right. So in terms of auto research and this feedback loop and what I deem is like the future of AI, these agentic systems auto updating, how are you handling that in the life sciences area? And that does kind of fall into the responsible AI type of approach, yeah.
I think that is a question probably better suited for how these tools are being implemented at these life sciences companies, because we are not the life science company ourselves, right? We are building these tools. How they're being used right now and how they're being tested, these are not, we are working with these organizations, but our limitation is we don't have access to how it's being updated and how they're being used. So that question is probably better suited to ask a pharmaceutical company directly. I wish I could answer that better.
Thank you.
You're providing the models and
yes, we're providing the models and
figuring out
yes.
how to put them together in a way to solve a
I would like to
problem.
know the answer to that question, though.
I think the question is, are you getting feedback from, as they're implementing these tools, are they providing feedback on what's working? Was that the question?
Yeah, what's working, but not the details of these proprietary models or their proprietary data. Right.
All right. I think we have time for one more question. I saw a hand over here. Right.
Yeah, thanks. Michael from Entity Data in Luxembourg. As I have the chance to have here in front of me, there's a question that's interesting, which is linked towards the first question about the security specifically of AI models. And Apple recently announced that they will use Gemini as their engine for. Now, Apple is a company, at least US-based, who is always using data privacy as a sales argument, as a main sales argument. That's a differentiator towards the different other companies, including Meta or Google. That selection, is that just purely, from your stomach feeling, is that just purely a commercial model, or is it something where they are so back against the wall that they have to do something, or is this also potentially linked towards that Gemini is a model which is privacy-based or has an advantage in that game or in a picture? It would be interesting to get an answer there.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the end of that question.
Yeah, it would be interesting to get an answer on your thoughts about it, because probably there's more than one answer.
There is probably, yes, there is, yes, certainly there is more than one answer on that one. I will have to, there is definitely more than one answer on that. I will have to probably give you a more robust answer, and I'm not best suited to answer that question. There is, if you can catch me offline, because I could give you a more robust answer than what I'm going to be able to give you right here. But if I think that's actually a very good question that you're asking.
Well, and related, we talked a little bit about data privacy, and particularly in healthcare, how AI has impacted how health systems approach data privacy and patient consent. You know, any thoughts to share on that aspect of it?
Well, I mean, from that perspective, from a data consent perspective and how these organizations are looking at this is, I mean, we're seeing, I mean, it is, well, we were talking about this earlier, we don't even, in an OR, for example, there's so much that we can do in an OR, in an operating room, with all of these tools and machines that are sitting in, with all of this raw data that's being collected. But sometimes, often, we don't even know who actually owns a lot of the data that's being collected inside an operating room. There's so much potential to better understand what is happening with the patient longitudinally, for example, but who is consenting? Whose information is that's being collected on this machine versus that machine? And so we're working, a lot of these organizations are trying to understand if we're going to be looking at longitudinal data, these hospitals are trying to understand whose consent. And so organizations like Johnson & Johnson, who actually own a lot of operating rooms across the country, are actually working to build these kinds of concepts of these ORs of the future, where they are thinking about these kind of consents and then these longitudinal data, because they are seeing these opportunities, these low-hanging fruits, so to speak.
Yeah. Certainly time for lots of change very rapidly. And exactly. I'm sure 6 months from now, if we have this conversation, it might be totally
It'll be different again, yes.
All right. Well, thank you again, Shweta. This was a fascinating and insightful conversation, and thanks for taking the time to share your experience with us.
Wonderful. Thank you.